You're watching the Leadership Forum here on AM Live. And of course, we want to buckle down to our discussion with our panelists this morning. And we know that President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga have upped their peace mission as they lead their troops in committing to reconciliation and opening a new chapter of national rebirth. The bonhomie among the leaders marked the climax of yesterday's national prayer breakfast, whose rallying call was tolerance, national unity and coexistence. Since entering a truce on March the 9th, President Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga have tried to push for a common agenda of national unity, but which has been resisted by some of their supporters and top allies, seeing it as a move to scuttle their ambitions for high political offices. Yet, following the acrimonious elections last year, the country was thrust onto the path of self-destruction as the government and the opposition clashed on everything. It was only after the handshake between the two leaders that the eyes thawed and sanity has prevailed. Our concern all along, however, has been that the rapprochement was solely between two individuals and that it was not predicated on a strong foundation and risked being swept away as the rank of the political elite felt left out and the public kept in the dark about the details. We still insist that the deal is built on quicksand. Many politicians and their acolytes are not convinced, more so the fellows whose political careers have thrived on the animosity between the two leaders. Beyond calming bruising political rivalry, the amity should focus on cleaning up the national mess, runaway corruption, insecurity, poor governance, failing services, crippling inflation and rising unemployment. Already, there are indicators that the camaraderie has blunted the opposition, which is getting cozy with the government, hence failing to ask critical questions and play its oversight role. So this, of course, relationship should not serve selfish political interest while exposing the public to grave dangers.
Don't worry, we're not singing today. You don't have to worry about that. And as I do, I want to invite also my brother Raila and Kalonzo. We have hurt one another. On my behalf, Ndugu, I ask for your forgiveness. Yeah. And I tender my apology.
I want to say for all the things that I did say or do on behalf of all our teams, I want to ask for your forgiveness. And on my behalf, and all those behind us, I tender my apology.
On behalf of my team and myself, I, in front of this congregation gathered here, prayer breakfast, tender my apology to my brother. During our discussions, he accused me of having insulted him. I also told him he also insulted me. He called me Kimuntu Muguruki. Apologize.
My brother William, you are the hustler number one. But a big hustler. I think you handed that over to me. I forgive you and may God bless you.
Do we have the right to be angry? Of course we do. But do we have the right to resist and refuse acceptance, forgiveness, and reconciliation? No, we don't.
No, we don't. And of course, we have our panelists here also to weigh in on that development yesterday. Allow me to introduce to you Dismas Mokua, who is a political risk analyst. Also, we do have with us Caren Wakoli, the Executive Director of Emerging Leaders Foundation. We have with us Bigambo, who is a governance expert. Also, Dr. Collins Odote, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi. And we have David Osiany, who is a public policy expert. Good morning, gentlemen and lady.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, an easy day today is Madarek. I expect you now to have taken breakfast. We should be having something on also your cups, right? But let's just also discuss what was happening yesterday. A breath of fresh air. We can begin with you, Dismas Mokua. What was your take yesterday? We're seeing what was happening, you know, the repentance and forgiveness and the promissory notes that we've had from both leaders.
Well, when you look at the event, and I would say there are two levels. There is the element of color and there is a content. So for the color, it is well good. You see our leaders, the leaders with the serious political capital, offering their apologies, others asking for forgiveness.
Yes.
But where the rubber meets the road, the Kenyan was not able to participate in the proceeding. And one begins to wonder if it's a prayer, is it supposed to be exclusive? Should it have maybe taken place at a public place where Tom, Dick, and Harry would have the opportunity to go and participate in the prayers? Where maybe Baby Pendo would have the opportunity to go and participate in prayers, where, in my case, maybe Bora from Kisi would have the opportunity to go and participate in prayers. Where would it be exclusive for the business and the political elite in Kenya to go and participate in prayers? And for me, I think that would be maybe the right way to look at it, because at the end of the day, the people who bear the brunt of the mischief of our political leaders is Wanjiko, is Wafula, is Onyango, and is Mora back in the village. And as a number of people have said, it should have taken place in public and everybody should have been invited so that we get to engage with these leaders, look at them straight in the eye, and tell them that Kenya is in a very sad state because of their decision-making process, which most of the time is not acceptable. And obviously, we missed that opportunity. So in my view, really, it was an opportunity for our political and business elites to meet over a cup of tea, compare notes, and go home. I'm not suggesting in any way that prayers do not work, because, you know, prayers is between the individual and God or Allah. But from a public perspective, it should have been an all-inclusive event.
All-inclusive. But we seem also to have borrowed heavily from the United States. We know this one began in the United States 55 years ago. And so the format, the template, I think, is, you know, so to speak, as we may be looking at it, elitist, that, yeah, it is just a preserve of the leaders, you know, the diplomatic corps, you know, and of course, the clergy, the laity being left out, as you mentioned. Could that be also a tripping wire? We can hear also from Caren.
For me, I think I welcome what happened yesterday at the National Prayer Breakfast. I have attended a couple of National Prayer Breakfasts in the past. I didn't attend the one for yesterday. And I actually do believe in the power of prayer, so that's a good thing. So the question about whether it should have been conducted in the public sphere for all the Kenyans to attend, or whether it was secluded only for a few political leaders, I think is neither here nor there, because I feel like it's an opportunity for these individuals to come together and just have a personal reflection. Although beyond just coming together to say, let's pray for the nation, let's apologize, let's forgive each other, it's about the intention and taking action. Leadership is everything. Leadership is so much. For me, leadership is a matter of life and death. And prayer without accompanying action that is in tandem with the spirit of the prayer is, I think, really useless in a sense. Because if I am praying and I'm saying, God bless Kenya, help us to forgive each other, and then I leave the precinct of that session of the prayer, yes, to go to lead my people, and I'm engaging in corruption, I'm inciting my community or my people to get into violence, not respecting the rule of law, I'm not respecting the constitution, then really it's useless. Then it becomes more like just a show of PR to say, you know, we mind about the nation, but then in reality, it's not the case. So I really hope that then with this forgiveness and shaking of hands and hugs and all that, that then it's actually going to materialize to something more meaningful, that then as a country, for instance, we put aside politics, 2022, 2027 and all whatever, politics, whatever that is, and focus on development, focus on the agenda of the welfare of Kenyans. Right now we have many people sinking into poverty, hopelessness, all this corruption, money being diverted instead of being taken to development, it's now enriching a few. Many more people are sinking into poverty. That is actually not what the essence of leadership is supposed to be.
All right.
Yep.
Maybe we should broach the subject of having it being a national, prayer day, like we have the National Thanksgiving Day with other democracies as well here in the country. If people are not feeling they're included in this, so as a matter of inclusivity, is that something we should broach, Jarvis?
Well, first, as to breakfast, I leave it to those who ate it. But when it comes to then matters of a nation's quest for prayer in all sincerity and honesty, as J.F. Kennedy put it in his inaugural address, sincerity is always subject to proof. We want the commitment of these leaders, as they made it yesterday, to be tested through action and through time. Because we as a nation have had now, up to yesterday counting, 16 prayer breakfasts. And immediately after the prayers and the breakfast, which is always remembered, the prayers forgotten, we always go back to where we began. And that is the tragedy of such kind of engagements. We must not just have engagements that are for demonstration of how well people can be costumed, and then we forget what this country needs and deserves. And when I saw leaders tendering forgiveness, asking for apology from one another, it reminded me the story of Paul of Tarsus on his way to Damascus. And when the scales later on fell off his eyes, he began to see anew. I wonder, what is it that has taken our leaders so long to see things anew? And for so long, Honorable Raila Odinga, for so long, Honorable Ruto, for so long, Honorable Kenyatta, for so long, Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, Wetangula, and even Mudavadi have been on their way to Damascus. I am happy that yesterday they were struck by a new finding, by that sharp light from the high heavens. I want to believe honestly that when they were asking each other for forgiveness, they should also reach out to every village and hamlet in this country, to every family that has suffered the bad politics over the years, and ask for forgiveness from them. Because the kind of forgiveness that is needed in this country is not from one politician to the other. In fact, the biggest forgiveness they need is from the common Kenyans. And beyond that, let them rise from the ashes of antagonistic politics and deliver on the table of nationhood a new thinking, a new politics, a new approach. In fact, it is Oluwole Babatunde Soyinka, popularly known as Wole Soyinka of Nigeria, who says that we must be gluttons for peace. If it is that kind of thinking that we must have in our politics, then we must put everything clearly on the table. It's the late Wamalwa Kijana who said that many times politicians engage while playing with or hiding dirty cards below the table. When you look at what is happening in this country, and from the prayer breakfast yesterday, which is very good, we need to have a serious critical shift. And I'll give one example. Look at how, for instance, we have shortchanged the people of Turkana. We humor them with the recent agreement that they will be given 25% of the proceeds of mining, drilling oil in Turkana. And we know very well that of all that, the county government getting 20 and the communities getting 5%, we know very well that in the next few years, we are going to find that part of the country chaos brewing in that part of the country, unless we have justice, reality and truth, and incentives that will also bring that part of the country to the progress or the level of development that we expect in this country.
Right.
The other thing is this: as we celebrate Madaraka Day today, are we going to see the real Madaraka reflected beyond the speeches that will be delivered in Meru today? The real Madaraka in villages, whether it's in the north of this country, whether it is in the Lok Victoria regions, whether it is in Moyale, whether it is Mombasa and the islands, etc. Let us have the real spirit of Madaraka, liberating every spirit, male or female, Only that way can we rise and move forward as a country.
Right, let's hear from Dr. Collins Odote.
Thank you, Debarl. I actually think that the discussions about the prayer breakfast in the context of either breakfast or prayer is misleading. Because Bigambo rightly says, this is number what? Number 16.
Yes.
So what's changed for those 16 ones? We've had prayers for the 16 and we've had breakfast for the 16. So that's not the difference. I think the difference, which is what we should be asking ourselves, is there something that happened yesterday at the prayer breakfast which is different from the others? And I think there is. That issue has everything to do with the conversations around reconciliation. I think it's important as Kenyans for us to acknowledge where there's an effort. I think a lot of negativity has been seen in this country, especially over the last 12 months. I know because I got personally involved in some of the discussions at some point in time. And you'd watch and ask yourself, are we talking about the same country? And the reality is that I think we're almost past the cliff. For the leadership, whether they are pretending or not, to be able to say it not once, twice, but thrice, that we made a mistake, I think is something we must be able to applaud them for and hold them accountable to. Because invariably, leaders don't even pretend to say, I'm sorry. At least on this time, they are saying, we are sorry. And saying it not once, but twice, but thrice, and consistently saying it. It gives us an opportunity as a country to be able to build onto it. So I think the bigger challenge is not whether what they did yesterday was inclusive or not. But I think initially, on the 9th of March, it was a conversation between President Uhuru-Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Yesterday, Kalonzo Musyoka has been asking, why am I not part of this conversation? Yesterday, you heard him saying, I wish my brother Wetangula and Musalia were here. I think we can build onto that. We should then be asking ourselves, where do we go from here? And I think that's the bigger conversation. Not that yesterday should have included everybody. You can't start this with everybody. Thanks.
All right, let's hear from David Osiany.
Thank you very much, Debarl. It's nice to be back here. Now, consensus building is not an easy thing because it calls on two people who often belong on the extreme ends of any engagement to drop some of their likings and try to forge a middle ground. And so any attempt by the two camps that have viciously fought ahead of the last election to try and make amends must be welcome at the very least. I bet, as Collins rightly puts it, it is very hard to force people to apologize. It's very hard. It must be something that you sit deep inside, have a moment of introspection, and try to say, because people are going to hold you to account. If it was just mere lip service, I know that this is the game of politics, and I know that sometimes there are things that are just done for the sake of the optics. But what is achieved by yesterday's public apology must be appreciated for what it is worth. And what is it worth? What it is worth is that we have made that first hard step towards building the bridges and healing the nation. Mm-hmm. It is a march towards the model of democracy known as conscientialism or consocialism. The democracy that lends from consciously looking back, looking at the gaps we have and trying to bridge those gaps. We have had a country that has atrociously fought on the basis of ethnicity. That we love one another, but heading into the election. In fact, how I wish this happened just before the elections. Mm-hmm. We love each other, we get along so well, but heading into an election, I don't know where the devil of a tribe wakes up from so actively, working 28 hours every half day. And so we find ourselves sitting in this place that's not very comfortable. Now, I want us to appreciate that if 2022 elections have to be different from the 2017 and 2013 elections, then this first step is fair enough. However, when we apologize, we must also recognize that we have only apologized for our words and actions in the election to each other. There's something bigger, or generally to the constituencies represented by the two gentlemen. I want someone to apologize for the death of the Kenyans ahead of the elections. If it is Boynet or Matiang'i, let them apologize and say in the same footstep and in the same vein, we apologize for our actions, which may have been deemed, because Collins is a lawyer, he will say that sometimes they will be thinking that that is to agree or accept, involvement directly in the deaths of those people. But we have to compel others, and we then must follow these words with cogent actions. If we are sorry for the country's place currently economically, if we are sorry that we have a debt burden that we are unable to bear, if we are truly sorry that we have let the corruption issues go on too far, then actions towards addressing these must follow and do quickly. I have seen the Building Bridges Now task force, it was a committee,
yes,
has been created. But I think a year is too long, because we all know what really bedevils this country. Why are they to give us a report in 1 year? I thought that if this is seen as urgent as it really is, then we would give them a timeline of maybe 3-6 months to deliver. So, good step. I'm proud to be a Kenyan today.
Thank you. And looking at the leadership of President Uhuru Kenyatta even yesterday, that it really came up, to his own, I should say. Is there a true mark of statesmanship that you saw? That him saying, first of all, that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, truly is a sign of strength. And also him taking the step, going full steam ahead and showing us, yes, I'm here now to actually ask for forgiveness. I tender my apology. What would you say on the state of leadership that is showcased yesterday? Let's hear from you, Dismas.
In my view, that was welcome, because rarely do you get a man to apologize. It's even more complicated when you have a president of the Republic of Kenya with serious political capital to offer an apology in public. So that's when he deserves a pat on the back, no doubt. But you would realize that when he requested his other colleagues to come on board, they were a bit surprised. It's as if they were not aware. So they came, they were not emotionally prepared for that. And as the other panelists have said, if you want to achieve long-lasting peace and stability in Kenya, we must have the end in mind, but we shouldn't begin with the end in mind. Like, for instance, we know all of us want to celebrate a new beginning. We shouldn't be placing too much faith in personalities. We should have too much faith in institutions. I mean, like, for instance, for Raila Odinga, is that the opportunity of having 3 handshakes? The first handshake with President Moi, then President Kibaki, then now President Kenyatta. Are we going to be at the mercy of one political figure that if he gets annoyed on a particular day, then there is going to be tension? Or are we going to have very strong institutions so that it doesn't matter what President Kenyatta thinks of an issue, and it doesn't matter what Raila Odinga thinks of an issue, but the nation is able to make progress? Now, we've seen a number of handshakes all over the world, which have been very fundamental. Yesterday, President Kenyatta spoke about President Nelson Mandela and de Klerk. De Klerk and Mandela did not wake up one day in the morning and said we are going to have a handshake. There was a lot of negotiations which entailed the activity of so many stakeholders. So by the time they were going to have the handshake, there was a lot of structures which had been put up to make sure that the handshake goes to fruition. And the same would be said of Isaac Rabin and Yasser Arafat. I mean, there was a meeting at Camp David, but there was a lot of midwifery taking place so that we were able to achieve progress. So in my view, in as much as we may want to say we've had 16 political breakfasts and 16 prayer meetings, at the end of the day, are these breakfast or meetings anchored on very solid grounds, such that if it rains, then that handshake doesn't get washed down to the river? And in my view, that's the question we need to be asking ourselves. That, for instance, this is the task force, which has been given 1 year. 1 year, as David indicated, is too long, because we almost understand the issues. But we need to go back to the people and say, these are the issues affecting Kenya. How do we take them to the next level? And by just saying that we're just going to allow 2 political leaders celebrate a new beginning for Kenya, that is merely the first step. But we need to go back to the ground, go back to the people who suffered during the violence and ask them, how do you come on board? We still go back to South Africa. Desmond Tutu was in charge of a very important committee. He did not just come up with recommendations from the sky that this is the way we need to make progress. He spoke to the victims, the people who are affected, the guys who are sleeping on empty tummies. Like, for instance, today, I mean, yesterday they said the biggest issue we have is corruption. There are about 4,000 maize farmers in Rift Valley who are watching that breakfast meeting at Safari Park on an empty tummy, wondering, are those the leaders who are responsible for my troubles, my tribulation back at home? And you know, some of those farmers have indicated they took loans to finance their production of maize, but right now they're left with dead stock. They're not able to sell that. There are folks back in Kisii who do not have access to roads, and they're told that either the national government or the county government officials have squandered these resources. So, in my view, for us to make progress, we must say that we are going to apologize, but we are apologizing over what? We are tendering apologies, but tendering apologies over what? Are we not, I mean, if I steal David's expensive chronometer here, when I'm taking it back, I must apologize. I say, I'm apologizing because I stole your chronometer. But now we're given blanket apologies. We really need to go and soul search. And this one doesn't just go to the political leaders who are gathered at Safari Park, but it's the entire nation. That we just need to accept that all of us have sinned. And I know that you remember at some stage when a fellow went to Jesus complaining about sinners, they were requested to pick the stone. All of them disappeared. So all of us in Kenya have sinned. So we need to go back and ask ourselves, as voters, when we elect officials during the last election, did we elect them because we believed in them or because we were electing our tribal leaders? And then how do these our tribal leaders assist us make progress?
Right. Do you think the political tone on 10 has completely changed with this particular, you know, the handshake transforming to hugs and, of course, the pledging and tendering of forgiveness and, you know, repentance that we saw yesterday? Yeah, definitely. I see a lot of political shifts happening. Like also yesterday you saw Joho and what's his name? Yeah, Joho and Moi coming together to say, oh, let's build bridges, let's work together and unite the nation. And of course the leaders who had the national prayer breakfast did the same. So I see a lot of shifts in the political space, but then for me, I am aware that politics is all about interests. So what are the interests they're looking at, for instance, as political leaders or as politicians? I just hope and trust that then this building of bridges will get them to a level where they say, so how do we mend the past, embrace the present, and then build the future for young Kenyans and for future generations in Kenya? So for instance, right now we have a lot of reports that have been done about injustices committed. I know that truth and reconciliation, of course, comes with creating justice and ensuring that victims of injustices, whether land, conflict, and all those things, become compensated, and then we're able to move forward. So I'm hoping these leaders will then come together, and of course being pushed by the citizenry to say, we have to implement some of these reports. We have to sort out issues, for instance, identified in the TJRC report, in the National Accord that we had a couple of years ago, issues around land, issues around employment for young Kenyans, so many issues. So I just hope that then this is going to turn out to be that. But then if it doesn't, what are we doing as Kenyans to make sure that that happens? Because for a long time, politicians and political leaders have held us ransom. But that is not supposed to be the case, because we employ them, we give them jobs. And right now, I think the most popular job in Kenya, or even in different African countries, is that of a politician. Why? There are high stakes involved. They are earning lots of money. They are increasing their salaries left, right, and center at the expense of development and at the expense of the larger citizenry of the country. Yet the people who are meant to be served by these leaders are suffering. That is not supposed to be the case. Right. Yeah. Let's say from Javas. Right? Do you think it changes the political tone and tenor in this country moving forward?
It is impressive that we find ourselves in this present situation and environment. It is something that has not happened in the journal of our political history, where our president and his arch rival or political nemesis come together, ask for forgiveness, and pledge to move forward with all sincerity and goodwill. We sincerely hope that from today onwards, also, our politics will change forever. But beyond that, beyond they're engaging in political discussions, the hugs and handshakes, etc.
Yes.
It is important for also these leaders to demonstrate their appreciation of the institutions that have been created by the Constitution, because that itself will demonstrate respect for the rule of law and the values that are domiciled in the Constitution. Without the respect for the Constitution and whatever is within the covers of our statute books, then our politics will be the kind of politics that is not really useful for significant national development and progress. Because where I come from, we always say that it is ridiculous when you find a man who lives close to a river washing his face with saliva. If we have these institutions, if we have our laws, let us respect them. Today, or this year, coming about 28 or 29 years since the close of the Cold War,
yes,
and the fall of the Berlin Wall, I remember the late President Reagan speaking to Gorbachev, and he said, Gorbachev, bring down this wall. Today, I am pained by the kind of high walls that are existing in this country. And as I sit here this morning, today, as even the President prepares to address this nation on Madaraka Day, beyond the remarks that they made yesterday, I would speak to President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga and also William Ruto. I would tell them, President Kenyatta, bring down the walls of corruption in this country. Bring down the walls of the lack of the respect for the rule of law. Bring down these walls. Because when you look at the kind of economic and political degradation we have faced since our nation's independence, it is because of these walls. We need to find ourselves in a situation where we reject, for example, what Francis Fukuyama wrote in his book titled The End of History, saying that, and in celebration of capitalism and calling it a win, that the capitalistic nature and approach to our development trajectory should be such that the people in the lower ranks of our society do not feel forgotten, rejected, or used merely for acquisition of political power by those individuals who are in office today. Now, I'll tell you also this analogy. When a shepherd chases a hyena away from a flock of sheep, the flock of sheep will celebrate the shepherd as a liberator. But the hyena will hate the shepherd as a destroyer of liberty. The definition of liberty to the sheep and the hyena is very different. Today, the definition of liberty, the definition of Madaraka, the definition of progress in this country for the poor is very different from that definition by the rich. We need to have a national conversation that will try to harmonize the definition of national progress and national liberty. Because our history has been distorted for so long a time. Look, as we think about Madaraka and the people who fought for this country's independence and the struggle for the Madaraka that we celebrate today, where are women? Do you want to tell me that women did not fight for this country's liberation? When we are celebrating Kimathi, rightfully so, and all the Mau Mau fighters, why is it that we cannot have a serious celebration as well of women in this country? Kinjeketile Ngwale and others, Nyungu Yamawe and others. Why is it that women have been left behind? As we move forward in this 21st century, it is important for us to be all-inclusive, bring women on board. When there was these hugs on stage yesterday, why is it that we were not ready and prepared to call also women to come on the forefront so that also they can be, they can ask for forgiveness and also forgiveness can be asked of them? Because when we go to elections every year, it is women and children who suffer the most. Yet, in all this forgiveness narrative, the women have been left out.
Thank you.
In the celebration of Madaraka, let us also celebrate women who have been at the center of the struggle of this country's independence and struggle for new liberation, or the second liberation, the third, etc., like Ngilu, like Martha Karua, and among many others.
Thank you. Let's hear also from Odote. Political tone and tenor, does it change the dynamics that we have right now? Where are we headed?
I don't think it fully changes, but it gets complicated. I hope it will change. And I think the real change, that's why for me, I don't agree with Osiany about 1 year being too long. I actually think 1 year is good. Because if we must address the fundamentals for this country, the software, you can't fix them in a day. Having been involved in a process of conversations in 2008 after the post-election violence, I know the power of conversation. And if we want this conversation to be cascaded, let's give it time. If you look at the 3 months that the President and Raila have had, everybody expected us to have seen content in those 3 months. I bet if we had had content in those 3 months, we would have disagreed by now. But the fact that we had time just to speak and be speculating. Now, if you watch newspapers, like it or hate it, everybody is now shaking hands. Even those who don't know what they're shaking about. Because it's a nice thing to do. And we need to ensure that that niceness is spread. In terms of complicating the equation, I think the rule book for 2022 was the rule book of community X against community Y, politician X against politician Y. The last 3 months has complicated that, such that if you ask today, everybody tells you, by the way, we know about one presidential candidate. Who are the others? And how they're going to run? Question number one. Question number two, but even that presidential candidate, is it automatic? That was not the conversation in November last year. In November last year, people even knew about the results of the 2022 elections before it was done. Now people don't even know who the candidates can be. And that, I think, is the complication. And hopefully, that can sustain for the next 1 year. Not so much so that it is difficult to know who the presidential candidate is, but so that when we have those elections, we can have an election with a difference. An election where leaders come up, not on the basis of political intrigues, not on the basis of ethnic divisions, but on the basis of substance. I pray that that can happen. I want to just add 2 other things. The first is what Caren said about young people. I think, first, as young people, there's been progress in terms of numbers in this country. If you go to the National Assembly now, we're not where we were in 2002. The one thing we must challenge young leaders much more is that, unfortunately, their objective voice is not as strong as you'd like it to be. You'll get 1 or 2 young leaders in parliament speaking about the values that are important, but the bulk of them have been playing catch up with the old politicians. That's a bad thing, and that's something that must change. I think the involvement of women in our politics is still a challenge, and I agree with Bigambo, except that for yesterday, I think the involvement was not an involvement of gender, it was an involvement of positions. And sadly for us, I think in the last elections, women weren't at the top places of leadership. So we can't have expected them just to be there yesterday because they are women. I think we must recognize that they've been excluded in the politics, but accept that yesterday, it was presidential and running mates, they weren't. So you could just have put them there because we wanted women. So I think we need to appreciate those 2 dynamics.
All right, let's hear from Osiany.
Foremost, let me just make it clear that I am quite aware that a year cannot be sufficient to solve our issues. All right? But it is not solving our issues that the task force is tasked with. It is tasked with giving us a blueprint towards solutions. If that is not done quickly enough, and it takes a whole year to get the blueprint, then we will have not too short a time before we get to the next electoral mood that is precisely one of the biggest problems that keeps taking us back to these things. And we need to agree that the task force is not doing something new. It's merely reinventing the wheel. The task force should just sit and say, implement the TJRC report, implement the Ndungu report because we have land issues, uphold Chapter 6 of the Constitution on integrity so that whoever does not meet the threshold is kicked out. When you uphold the spirit and letter of the Constitution by itself, before even delving into these other reports that have been done, which have been very comprehensive and which took great conversations. Ndungu report took serious conversations. The Kroll report took serious conversations. Putting up the TJRC report was conversations going around the country. Even coming up with the new constitution was a result of conversations around the country. So this task force is not coming up with anything new. It ought to just do its work because they already know the problem. I still insist that a year is too long, but I can't reverse that. It's gazetted. So be it as it may, I will just have to wait as all other Kenyans. If it were me, however, it would take shorter. Now, has the tone and tenor of politics changed in this country following the handshake? I will not even exercise my mind about that, because, Debarl, we have 4 whole years ahead of us. Such a long time. This is such a nascent stage to even think about anything 2022. 30 minutes of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga in Harambee House changed things on its head. What if he goes and has a handshake with Ruto tomorrow in his office? What will we pick from that? What if Gideon Moi wakes up tomorrow and says, I'm not running, I want to support my brother? What if the 2013 deal of Musalia Mudavadi to the presidency is again reignited, and Uhuru endorses Mudavadi and says, I am meeting my promise to you in the spirit of the handshake? 4 years is such a long time. So many things can happen in 4 years that the tone and tenor, the music just began. We can hear it. It doesn't change. Colin says it gets complicated. I agree, for now. It gets a bit complicated just for now. We do not know the realignments that are going to happen. So much will depend on the actions between now and then. The Building Bridges team can decide that anyone that has been named in any corruption case does not run. And Uhuru, together with the judiciary, agree and firm it up that this will not happen. Then that changes everything. It almost throws everyone out of the race of the people who are running. Others can decide the yardsticks can be placed in such a manner that we will have an entirely different or unthought of people heading to the 2022 contest. So, yeah, so we just sit back, grab some popcorns, watch.
Right, so yeah, it seems the political layout is changing significantly, I should say. And the question would be, again, looking at yesterday's also sort of a reconciliation that was happening on the podium there. Some of these guys were shoehorned to do it, you know, not willingly. It's because maybe because of the gesture and the posturing that was there, you have just to abide by the script. But was there any willingness, you know, from their part to actually do it? Or, yeah, you were just somewhat shoehorned to have this reconciliation?
Well, you know, President Kenyatta has got the biggest political capital in Kenya. And when he calls you up for a meeting, whether or not you like him, whether or not you like the instructions, you have to respond. So yesterday when he called his deputy president and the other 2 leaders, they had no option. I mean, you wouldn't think that in as much as, say, in the event that the DP doesn't like what the president wants, he would remain seated or take a walk. You have really to follow those instructions, and you have to act in as much as you don't like. Yes. But if you look at the body language of those leaders, then you would actually see that most of them were very uncomfortable because it was not part of the script. But be that as it may, the biggest challenge today lies with President Kenyatta. That you have legacy politics and succession politics. For President Kenyatta, he desires to achieve his Big 4 agenda. He wants to deliver in the next 4 years. But that one is being clouded by succession politics. I mean, it's not a year into office, and people are already discussing who is going to be running in 2022 and who is going to be the running mate, and how do they intend to form their alliances. So President Kenyatta finds himself in a very difficult position. And I guess that's the reason why he did what he had to do yesterday, by calling everybody to order and telling them that for the next 4 years, you're going to dance to my tune. And if you're not prepared to dance to my tune, you're going to face very serious challenges. Because it's only in Africa that you're going to have a lame duck president still in year 1 of his 2nd term. Because, you know, the politicians, since Kenyatta took office, especially the deputy president, were behaving in a manner suggesting that they don't know President Kenyatta is still in office. You would actually think we are in 2021 December, or we are approaching 2022. So the president had to move with speed. But as we now look at all these shifting alliances, and you're referring to it as tenor, the big question we need to be asking ourselves, when Senator Gideon Moi goes to Mombasa and he meets with Governor Joe, and they say they're going to be having unity meetings across the nation, what is driving these unity meetings? Do they want to accumulate a political capital? And this political capital they're accumulating is for what purpose? Is it consistent with our national interest? Is it consistent with our public interest? And during all these meetings around reconciliation, I've not heard anybody speak about unemployment. that they're going to sort out this unemployment issue. I've not heard anybody talk about economics, how they're going to grow this cake. I come from Kisii, where we've got a lot of tea and coffee. There's not a single politician who is saying that as we discuss our legacy politics or succession politics, we are going to grow our coffee and tea industry to a certain level that our products become global brands, that the farmer has got a good return on investment. So maybe instead of us lamenting till the cows come home, maybe as a nation, first of all, we need to identify what are our national security interests and what are our public interests, so that if they are shifting alliances, when Senator Moi goes to Mombasa, or when Governor Joe starts doing his country campaign, is he talking about unity because he wants to grow the economy, or he simply wants to position himself for 2022? If as a nation we don't get to that point, then we'll be wasting time. I mean, if you use the example of the Middle East, when a kid is born on the Israeli side, it's as if in their DNA, they know that if they're not very careful, they're going to face extinction. And on the Palestinian side, the same thing. For us as a nation called Kenya, do we have anything which is putting us together? I mean, if you want to use some examples, you may start shedding tears. For the longest time, we've considered Nairobi to be the hub in terms of passenger and cargo business. But we understand that our neighbor down the road, President Kagame, is putting up an international airport, coming up with serious infrastructure, that in the next few years, regional travelers will have no business coming to Nairobi. Now, as a nation, do we see that as a challenge? We've got tourist facilities in Kenya. Understand we have one of the best national parks, but are we marketing it? A few days ago, you saw Kagame cutting a deal with the English football clubs to do his marketing. Why haven't we done similar things? Now, if they're going to be shifting in political alliances, one hopes that it's about taking Kenya to the next level. You know, we have these tired examples we keep on using, that when we were born 1963, we were age mates with, or rather, we had the same indicators with Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea. Where are we today? And as Wakoli had indicated, it's about leadership. And the tragedy with leadership is that if you've got a leader who identifies with your national and public interest, then you're going to be like Singapore. You're going to be like Malaysia. But if you've got a leader who doesn't know where you're supposed to be going, we are going to be in trouble. So the big question we need to ask ourselves, as we have got these handshakes, yes, which are graduating to hugs, are their selfish interests consistent with our national interest, with our public interest? For instance, instead of us beating around the bush, let's ask ourselves, President Kenyatta's selfish interest, are they consistent with Anyango's interest in Kisumu? Raila's selfish interest, are they consistent with Mura's interest back in my village in Mososho? Or do they want this political capital because of their branding, or they're just merely looking at 2022?
Thank you. Can I just chip in? I mean, Dismas has alluded to the model of Rwanda trying to brand itself and promote its tourism in the UK using Arsenal, which, whereas we really need to still up our game in so far as attracting tourists is concerned, I think that's a wrong example to let go. Rwanda cannot be given 6 million pounds by the UK, and then they invest 10 million pounds in paying Arsenal to brand them. You can't take aid and then invest the whole of aid plus something on top in paying one of the small clubs in the country. The Daily Mail was very ruthless with Kagame's decision.
It
is reckless to do that. But we have to get different models of moving the country forward. Now, 46 governors are going to Makueni to benchmark. 46 governors in the country did not know what to do. Is that what we are trying to say? That they have to now go and see what one governor is doing? I bet, and it's a good thing. I don't want to castigate them. I don't want to insult them. Not at all. It's a good thing, but going forward, don't we want to see a lot more leaders who are tested on their ability before they are elected? Don't we want to see more leaders who can stand tall and say we are not corrupt? Don't we want to see, as we are fixing the nation, can we see the decisiveness in trying to ensure that the 600 billion Kenya shillings that is pilfered in corruption, That's the budget of Rwanda, Burundi, almost 8 countries combined.
But how do we test these leaders? Because we don't have any spawning ground to actually test them.
No, but
that's why the office will be the spawning ground to actually test them.
But that's why this building bridges Debarl is very important for us. Because initially, it was about, do you speak my mother's language or not? This helps us make the first step forward. You will now not go to Nyeri and just say, I don't like Raila Odinga and get the vote. They will try to hold you to account. We have elected you for 5 years, sir. Where are our roads and where are our school equipment?
Thank you. Let's hear from Javas as we try and wind up on this building bridges and we look at now the corruption
as
issues
the nation builds these bridges, I want to agree with the words of Professor Bigambo, Professor of Communication at Moi University, who says that if you don't handle your thoughts properly, you will not handle your words properly.
Are you by any chance related to the Professor Bigambo?
Well,
answer the question.
So the thing is this. We have seen how our politics over time has been torn by how our leaders have not been properly handling their words. And by way of the forgiveness that was sought yesterday, it is important that now all the other politicians pick cue from that. That our politicians now should always test their words, weigh their words before they speak, whether they are angry or not. And Kalonzo put it very well, that after the election, because he was angry and frustrated, he had no good words for his political nemesis. And I think that's the kind of drift we need to take. Because if we don't, then this Building Bridges initiative will just be a good chapter in our country's history. The other thing that we now need is, in the spirit of public participation, how do we bring everybody on board? Having conversations in chiefs, barazas, etc. and whatnot. Because these conversations now need to start from there, coming up, not start from up, going down. And have everybody feeling a part of this. Then there's the place of reparations. You see, the greatest injustices that have been committed, from Wagala massacre, etc. and all this, these individuals need to close that book. That book should be closed through this Building Bridges initiative. And our president and Raila Odinga, the former prime minister, should actually reflect on all these things. And then today, factually speaking, you know that somebody from Nyanza will find it hard to go and invest deeper in Central, or the other way around, or even some individuals fearing to go and invest in the Rift Valley. After the 2007-2008 political situation that we found ourselves in, it is good that now we are building these bridges. Now let us find this nation crossing those bridges to the better side of the promised land. And we, using the media, professionals, politicians, etc., need to ask ourselves the way Martin Luther asked the people, where do we move from here? If we do that, then we will find a very fine place or home, in the words of the Greeks who said, let us tame the savageness of man and make the world a better place. If we tame the savageness of our politicians, Kenya will be a better place.
Right, thank you. Now, as we're winding up on that, we have a very interesting also editorial cartoon in today's Star, and I think maybe they were reading from the same script together with Gado in the Standard. In the Star, we have Victor with this particular editorial cartoon. Look at it, and then we'll have a guest from the touch screen. We have Victor, and that particular editorial cartoon, please, if you may just pick it up. Of course, we do also have Gado with it, editorial cartoon from the Standard as well. I just wanted to comment on that, Karen, briefly. Looking at, this is now Raila Odinga and, of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta as well. Karen?
Okay. It looks really, really interesting, but also telling. So the leaders say, one says, sorry, the other one says, I'm sorry too, but then why did it take us too long, to come to this? But below where they're standing, you can see people fallen, citizens. This is really sad, yet it is the reality of our nation today. And this is not just something that happened once or twice or thrice. It is something that happens over and over and over again. Every time before we get into an election period, people die. Politicians incite individuals. There's a study that was done that revealed that political leaders influence citizens 57%. And then the other bodies are like the media, religious leaders, but then the first are the politicians. So they have a say. So why did it take them too long? But then I don't think that needs to be the issue. The issue now is they've already reconciled. But are they going to, like it was said earlier by other panelists, are they going to take this down to the people?
All right, thank you. Dismas?
The key thing is...
very briefly on it.
Yeah, those skulls, those are the people who are supposed to be right in the middle of any conversation. And it goes back to what we are asking. Does that hug, is it sensitive to the interest of those people who are dead? And in my view, the skulls represents life and property. A lot of property went up the flames. People died. And in the middle of this reconciliation, in the middle of the hugs and the handshakes, nobody's talking about the people, the victims of violence. Nobody's talking about the number of lives lost. Even the IDPs from, all the time we've had election, a number of them still have not been settled. Those are the remaining questions, and David indicated a number of things have already been captured in 1 million reports that just need implementation.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from Colin Odote.
You know, at the risk of repeating the ban, you know, the Building Bridges initiative, at least from what I read, it's not about the hug. And we seem to be discussing it as if it is the hug. The hug gives us the opportunity to address the issues that are underlying for this country. And if you look at the document, those issues were 9. Both as media, as panelists, and as citizens, we seem to be forgetting those 9 issues. We talk about the hug, then we speak about 2022. Yet we forget that there are 9 things that were identified that are fundamental, including security issues that will have to address the issues of death, including inclusivity, that will have to address the fact that does Bigambo and Odote have the same chances as Osiany and Mokua? And addressing those requires us to be honest with ourselves and face each other in the face. They're not things that we will deal with through the hug. The hug is nice because for me, it provides us with a platform. Take the one example that I hope that we can get time to discuss, corruption.
Yes, yes.
Under normal circumstances, Debarl, you would see politicians on national television saying how their people are being fixed. Because they knew they would use it to play ping pong. Because of this environment, hopefully now we can discuss real issues about corruption.
Right. Let's hear from Osiany.
The question would be, is politics worth dying for? Looking at that, there's a chance that people, the political leaders, will make up tomorrow when we have gone for machetes and killed ourselves at their request. Is it worth it? I really hope, because that cartoon is rather somber, I really hope that the leaders will mean what they say in building these bridges. This bridge that remained unbuilt is where those skulls lie. Are we going to watch many others walk into that abyss, or will we truly build a bridge of reconciliation over those skulls and declare not again?
Thank you. Bigambo, briefly.
It is sad that 2 men are standing alive in a sea of skulls. Those skulls are sending a very powerful message, not just to us as a nation, but those skulls are speaking. They are speaking to President Kenyatta. They are speaking to former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Will you hear us? It is Professor Everett Stander in his poem titled I Speak for the Bush who asks that I speak for the bush and you speak for the civilized. Will you hear me? Today, there are 2 languages in this country. The language of those who are used by politicians and the language of the users who are politicians. The used, the common man and woman are asking, we speak, you speak for the elitists, etc. Will you hear us as we shout? Those skulls are shouting.
Thank you.
Will they hear them?
Will they hear them? And of course, also that has been captured by Gado. I cannot be able to open it in the right format, but this is how it looks today with the illustrator. Just to give you an idea, they are somewhat reading from the same script. We saw the 2 are hugging amidst the skulls, but now they're actually on top of the skulls as well. And we cannot really belabor the point. It's the same issues that you've raised here this morning as far as this is concerned. But while we were having the prayer breakfast at Safari Park, hundreds of protesters marched through the streets of Nairobi yesterday against increased cases of high-level corruption. Protesters are angered by runaway corruption, and that no high-ranking official has been jailed. 24 civil servants and business people were charged on Tuesday with involvement in the theft of nearly $100 million of public funds and will stay in custody pending during the fourth hearing on their application for bail. The suspects, who include the public service minister's principal secretary, pleaded not guilty on Tuesday to Magistrate Douglas Odote to charges that relate to theft at the government's National Youth Service. The message, of course, we know it as state agency that trains young people and deploys them to work on projects ranging from construction to traffic control. President Uhuru Kenyatta pledged to stamp out graft when he was elected in 2013, which is saying he has been slow to pursue top officials in government.
Tumefika place hata hatuna limits, like it's just so immoral. So nimesikia vibaya bila kucomment kwa Facebook nikadecide nikam.
Ufisadi unapotezea watu wengi opportunities. Ukiangalia barabara zetu, ukiangalia hospitali zetu, ukiangalia nafasi ya kazi zimehujumiwa kwa sababu ya ufisadi. Na tukiendelea na hii trend, most likely in the next 5 years will not have a country. That is why I purpose today to be here, to join my colleagues and ensure that our voice is heard.
So people getting agitated, the angst and anger that we can see so far on the streets, is how palpable is it? Let's hear from you, Caren.
People need to go to jail. Absolutely, people need to go to jail. People need to take responsibility for their actions. And I strongly feel and believe that if we made it really punitive to engage in corruption or steal or misappropriate public resources, you actually go to jail and you pay highly, then these cases would actually go down. Do we have the political will and the commitment to actually deal with and address corruption? I would say no. Right now we're seeing a few heads turning, but then is it going to be sustained? I really like what I saw citizens doing yesterday on the streets, demonstrating. I really wish I would have been there, but then I was somewhere else doing something. But then the bigger thing is, are we as Kenyans going to hold our leaders to account? And in fact, they're not leaders, they're just people in positions of authority. And it is very unpatriotic to engage in corruption. Look at, for instance, the billions of shillings that have gone into people's pockets, yet we are busy borrowing to take to development, yet we are taking the same money that we're borrowing to furnish our own homes, and you know, it's really sad, but then we have to hold our leaders to account. You have to ask difficult questions, and it's not just happening at the national level, it's happening at the county government level. See the level of corruption and level of mismanagement and misappropriation of resources that happen at that level. But beyond that, I think we also need to ask ourselves questions as Kenyans, because our leaders are in a big way reflective of who we are as a people. At election times, we do ask for bribes to be voting staff before electing politicians. And of course, they know that is what it takes for them to get into office. So right now, they're busy amassing, and then election time, they say, oh, I took from you, so let me give it back, in fact, just a little, and then you put me back into office. So I see that poverty that we face in Africa is actually by design. Politicians are aware that if you keep people ignorant, you keep them poor, they are then at your own mercy. And you can compensate yourself in politics over and over for as long as you keep them ignorant, keep them silent, keep them the handshake yesterday, President Uhuru asking the leaders to come. That was, like we said earlier, uncomfortable, but I hope you can also then take the other uncomfortable step of saying, so and so, if you are in a position of authority and money got lost under your watch, go to jail, but not just go to jail, but pay that money, then go to jail first.
Right. Let's hear from Dismas.
intelligent governments. Because when you look at the architects of corruption, they drive top-of-the-line vehicles, they stay in market estates, they're able to enjoy small boats at their pleasure, at their resource. But nothing ever gets to them. If you go steal public resources, probability of you getting into political election is very high. There is no punishment for that. And we've got to be good examples and be honest to ask ourselves. For instance, right now in Malaysia, the former Prime Minister is in trouble. They're saying that he's told. In South Africa, Zuma is in trouble. In South Korea, the president in jail. In Brazil, the president in jail. But we haven't seen that in Africa. Now, when you come to Kenya, there's no big fish behind bars because of corruption. Yes, we are all agreed. This one, understand about 24, 25 people were taken to court, but all of them were acquitted because of lack of evidence. But we all know that the resources disappeared. That's number one. And number two, when you want to quantify the number, when you look at the numbers, Rwanda's budget, as much as I was saying that you can just go to Rwanda, but Rwanda's budget is 258 billion Kenyan shillings. And our Auditor General says that we lose about 500 billion. Effectively, the money stolen in Kenya can run Rwanda for 2 years. Meaning that if Kenya wanted to enter into contracts with arsenals and companies, we can do multiples and get many more tourists coming to Kenya. But you know, we are sitting right now and praying to various gods that corruption will come to, and nothing seems to happen. And in my view, the question we need to ask ourselves, where does this money go? All this money that is stolen, because it's no longer thousands or millions, it's now in billions. Where do these billions go? Because these people are stealing billions, are not interested in buying a piece of land at a place called Mosocho to put up a one-bedroomed house, or they don't want to buy a Pro Box. I mean, when you're stealing a billion, your intention is not really to buy a Pro Box or to buy another house, but that's money that is beyond your estimation. And I would even venture and say, this is the kind of money which can be used to destabilize the nation. This is the kind of money that can send all the governors home. You know, you can use this money to impeach. Because, you know, Americans have got us saying that money talks and the people love the color of money. So where does this money go? Does anybody know where this money goes? That's number one. Then number two, in my view, corruption should now be a national security concern. This is the kind of thing which is supposed to make the president nervous, Dr. Matiang'i to lose sleep, and the national intelligence guys to lose sleep. Because when you're talking about corruption, these are how you allow foreigners to come to Kenya, get a Kenyan passport, get a Kenyan ID, and there's even a probability that foreigners are high in the ranks in our public service because they have got a Kenyan passport, they've got a Kenyan ID, and they can study any language. They can study my mother tongue, Kisi or Swahili, and join the military, join the police, even join the intelligence. Now, those are the risks we have around corruption. And at my fear of upsetting Dr. Odote here, I think now corruption should be a capital offense. That as soon as we prove beyond doubt that you've stolen our resources, we take you to Uhuru Park, we strip you naked, we pour cold water, and we shoot you. It's a similar example which was used by Jerry Rawlings in Ghana, yes, when corruption had run out of hand. Why can't we do that? And then we must treat the beneficiaries of corruption, the architects, family, and friends, as if they've got a very bad disease. That if I know a certain fella, maybe Mr. John Onyango, is a beneficiary of corruption, and I see him coming to my restaurant, I should not even serve him. When I see this kind of guy going to watch a soccer match, I shouldn't want to sit next to him. Because right now, the people, the beneficiaries of corruption, when they go for a church service, they're going to be given red carpet attention.
Right, let's say from Javas, because on this, do you think we should have a concentration camps for these guys?
You want me to respond to
we just like lepers.
Just before Dr. Odote responds to Mokua, Mokua is asking, where does this money go? My good friend Mokua, I don't know whether you are new in Jerusalem. I could be because
yeah, Jerusalem.
Yeah. And I would also ask, are you new in Kenya? We know where it goes.
Where does it go?
The huge pipes through which this money and the huge tunnels through this, where this money goes to. In fact, will even upset the bones of your grandmother that are now turning in the grave. Now, looking at the Goldenberg scandal, the Triton, the Anglo leasing, NYS 1, NYS 2,
NHC,
NHC,
yes,
and even Kenya Pipeline, it creates an impression in me that we need to erect a monument of corruption in the CBD. Because all over the world, example after example, all the things or people that are celebrated and cherished and that are visible across history and historical periods, their monuments are erected. In this country of ours, this sad country of ours, we seem to cherish corruption. And it has been part of our history from independence to now. Debarl, we need a monument of corruption in the CBD. Because corruption needs to be the thing, the god that is worshipped by politicians. But I take encouragement from the words of the president when he's spoken about commitment to fight graft. I've listened to the Chief Justice. I have listened to the Deputy President saying that those who will be found corrupt should go to jail. I have listened to leaders such as Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen. I've listened to Raila Odinga speaking about and against corruption. I've listened to James Orengo speaking against corruption. Common citizens such as Boniface Mwangi, who've struggled against graft and bad governance. Individuals, when you're thinking about yesterday and the demonstration, people like Wanjeri Nderu and Alamin Kimathi and all those people who were part of the conversation and the demonstration, these are individuals that should be honored and celebrated because they are pushing for a better Kenya. All of us should push for a better Kenya. Because if we do that, then we'll find solace in the words of the prophet Isaiah, that we will mount on wings like eagles and soar high. If we do that, if we elect to believe in the words that we speak as leaders and as citizens, because every Kenyan is angered with this corruption.
Thank you.
And our leaders are now also angered. Then can we collect our thoughts, our energy, energize, and say that today our resolve is one. We are standing against graft, and any person that is corrupt will not be kept within our borders.
Thank you. Let's hear from Collins. Of course, you can get a rejoinder now.
Yes, when Dismas was saying that at the risk of angering me because of his assessment of corruption being a capital offense, I was asking myself, does Dismas think I'm too corrupt that I need to be taken?
Okay, then let me offer that clarity.
Then I discovered
it's because he's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer.
We understand. He was talking about the legal issues. And two things. The first is I think he knew that he was wrong in what he was saying from a legal perspective, because capital offense are not those that are shot in Uhuru Park. Capital offense are hanged through a court process. And in my view, I actually think that that is not the problem in the fight against corruption. The problem is not the severity of the sentence. If you watch what happened the last 2 weeks on NYS2 and watch what happened in 2015 and 2016, no law has changed. None at all. In 2016, there was an anti-corruption summit at State House.
Yes.
And no lesser than the president said, what do you want me to do? He was helpless. And you had all the institutions fighting corruption, and each of them was passing the buck. Now, you see everybody saying, I will. The CJ is saying, I will support this. So all it means is that if institutions did their work with what we have, the fight against corruption will be dealt with. Look at the headline for today's Nation.
Yes.
Governors, be aware.
Yeah, that's where we're headed.
It is common sense that if you go across this country, you find that invariably the people who own hotels, the people who own big buildings are politicians. It's common sense. So it cannot be that the only entrepreneurs are politicians. It must mean that there's something that is fundamentally wrong. And if we dealt with that just once, there'll be a difference. Osiany was saying everybody's going to Makueni. What has Kibwana done so fundamentally differently? He hasn't done a miracle. He's done the right thing. So in the fight against corruption, for me, if our institutions did the right thing, if you are able to know that, by the way, it is possible to go to jail for being corrupt, and just one person went to jail, you will see the difference. That's number one. Number two, I think the events of yesterday against the citizens demonstrated several interesting things. I saw people that I haven't seen in the streets for quite a while. I saw my very good friend Captain Bat. It was very nice to see them back because that then means that citizens are actually now saying back that way, we can't continue sitting back any longer. This has become a crisis. The second thing that was nice is that we didn't see the policemen trying to stop the demonstrations. Because that's been the excuse. When you want to try and do things, we fight corruption, but two excuses. One is politics. We politicize it. And yesterday in some forum that I think Bigambo and myself in, an accountability demand forum, somebody tried to say, you guys, why were you in the streets yet you voted for this regime? And they were quickly shut out so that we ensure that the debate about corruption is not political. It's not about which political divide or the other. But secondly, that we then don't use our security forces to stop us from getting to corruption. The last thing that we need to ask ourselves, and that's why for me I think some of the conversations are going to be difficult. You know, as these efforts of the last 2 weeks are happening, EACC is a bystander. You haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen it, maybe we should ask ourselves, maybe we should have bystander forever. Maybe we don't need it. Maybe the mistake that we made over the last 10 years of ensuring that institutions that were responsible were given access by creating other institutions has not worked for us. Because now the people who are dealing with this are the institutions that originally were supposed to be dealing with crime. ECI and Odote. It remains that if the actual institutions are trying to create the right way, then some of the auxiliary institutions that we try to create are not necessarily some of our budgets are getting
perpetuate this notion that it is politicians who are corrupt or who are most corrupt. Because this is a country where Magoha has had to, working together with Matiang'i, has had to fix parents who are buying exams for their children. That's corruption. This is a country where if we are arrested for speeding or for an offense, the easiest way is to pay 1,000 or 2. This is a country where we have seen leaders of the church bought to try and push an agenda, and they do not question even when what is presented to them proceeds definitely and obviously of corruption. It calls on us to fix the software of the nation. We must go and learn lessons from Singapore and Japan that instills in a newborn as they grow up that it is wrong to steal. In Japan, if you are mentioned as being corrupt, you do not wait as is in China to be executed. You are yourself. There is no honor because they believe in hard work. A taxi man told me in Singapore, Chief, here we are taught from back in the days of Lee Kuan Yew that your work, you must work for whatever you earn. Lee Kuan Yew as a president was so decisive that he left an impression on the nation and the newborns. Now, back in the day, there was a lesson called ethics. I don't know. In my time in primary school, I was not taught this ethics thing. I depended entirely on my mother's teaching to uphold the statutes of the Bible, of the good book. If we instilled in our children from birth, as they grew up, right from home, that it is right to earn your keep and earn it fairly, we will have made the most tremendous step towards a better nation. The president cannot come to your home.
Yes.
When you buy things and you know no one even questions you. You walk in and your partner doesn't even ask how you have afforded a car for 20 million, and yet we know, my dear husband, that you earn 500,000. That said, this is going to call on the president to be extremely decisive. It's going to be painful because at some point you're going to be forced to fire your greatest cronies. He should look at the example of Magufuli, who had to fire his favorite friend, a minister for Home Affairs, for showing up in a meeting drunk. And say, my friends, if I'm going to decide on corruption, you remain my buddy.
Thank you.
Let's draw the line and do it. Learn from Mahathir bin Mohamad, who has been called from retirement in Malaysia at 92. To come back and preside over a new dispensation. And when he took over, what did he do? Impounded the outgoing prime minister and decided to walk into his home and found billions of shillings. Learn from Bachelet in Chile, who has over her time of presidency reduced corruption in Chile by 60%. You must not do it all, but you must do a substantive amount if we are going to make any steps. So what we need to instill in the nation is that the fight against corruption starts in our homes and in our environments, and we must be the champions for it. President Uhuru Kenyatta can only do so much, and we hope he does what is due him, because unto whom much is given, much more is expected.
Much more is expected. Of course, I want you to comment briefly as we're winding up. We have the Daily Nation, which is headlining this particular story, still on corruption. And it says, governors, beware. This is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Governors, beware. And it's all about the MCAs. Crackdown, purge against corruption, which started at National Youth Service, might soon come to a county near you. County chiefs and MCAs have been eating taxpayers' money with a big spoon, splashing out on foreign trips and overpriced goods. Auditors' reports were ignored, but that could change. This story is tucked on page 4 of the Daily Nation today. So we can see what has started on the national level could cascade down also to the counties as well. So it shouldn't just stop with the courts here in Nairobi. Milimani courts are arraigning some of these people that were embroiled in NYS, but it can actually go down to the counties. Maybe as a closing remarks, let's hear from Caren, 30 seconds, briefly on corruption and maybe your sentiments about today and also Madaraka today.
Okay, now looking at the headline of the Daily Nation, Governors Beware, I think it should read Kenyans Beware. Like Osiany said, it's about us Kenyans. We need to have a paradigm shift of our thinking and embrace the spirit of hard work, values, honest living, because what is happening now, we are busy celebrating the people who are wealthy and yet they are amassing and nothing is happening to them at our own expense. We need to have an inner, deeper reflection as a nation and save our country, because as it is right now, things are not good. Things are not good,
right,
absolutely. So let's take responsibility, and it begins with us.
Right, Jarvis.
The man does not live in this country who is more hopeful than I am today, that we stand on a new frontier of politics and hope. Today, as it's written on the cover of the Daily Nation, that governors beware, I think also all leaders in this country should beware, and every citizen should be. Because in the hands of the common citizens, much more than the hands of governors and the hands of the president and the deputy president, is the task of building this nation and taking it forward. Because if we must be the co-creators of our nation's development, then the governed and the governors and the leaders should come together and strive forward toward that better day where we say that good governance and the rule of law shall reign this country moving forward.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's hear from Collins Odote.
I think Kenyans are a very hard-working group. Kenyans get disappointed by the kind of leadership that they see. In 2002, we were the most optimistic people. As we celebrate Madaraka Day today, let's hope that this is an opportunity for renewal for the country, an opportunity for us to be able to start giving the best example from the top out the way to the bottom, so that we can actually celebrate hard work and not shortcuts.
All right, let's hear from also David Osiany.
I hope that Kenyans are able to support the initiative started or commenced by the President Uhuru Kenyatta and the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga towards a better future for this country, towards assessing and resolving the issues as captured in that document, the 9 of them. And in that same spirit, as we try to fight against graft, each Kenyan is tasked in their own spaces to be the champions for a better governed nation by themselves imparting lessons on good governance. The governors themselves, the governors, I've seen governors beware, ought to know they've been given the rarest chance to make their small kingdoms called counties a reflection of what Kenya ought to be. If they do it right, then they will be able to brag when they are gone that when I had the chance, I was not president, but I changed the lives of my people, as has been done by Professor Kivuda Kibwana.
Thank you. Right, Dismas.
Well, you know, the Auditor General every year gives us reports, and he says resources have been misallocated. And I'm hoping that all Kenyans of goodwill, and especially beneficiaries of the handshake, will give the Auditor General all the political goodwill that he needs, as well as the new DPP, so that at least on the worst case scenario, we've got 2 governors, 2 principal secretaries, and 2 cabinet secretaries behind bars. That will be a very strong signal to all and sundry that you are not going to steal Murray's resources and then smile all the way to the bank.